If I had £1 for every time someone told me my retirement plan is to simply downsize when I'm ready, I probably wouldn't be sitting here making this video. But the thing is, over the last 20 years, house prices have risen hugely in the UK, which has led a lot of people to actually rely on downsizing when it comes to retirement. But the problem is, downsizing is not a retirement plan. Downsizing is a break glass in an emergency situation, and is not a plan you want to be relying on. And in this video, I'm going to explain the two biggest difficulties when it comes to downsizing. And the second one has absolutely nothing to do with money whatsoever. But if you're new here, my name's Ben, and I've worked in financial planning for the last 10 years, helping people build their confidence around their personal finances and their retirement plan. Now, it's no secret that over the last 20 years, property prices have increased massively in the UK, which has led most people in their 40s and 50s having the majority of their net worth built up within their property, to the point where over 3/4 of people aged between 45 and 60 are planning to downsize as part of their retirement plan. Now, on the face of it, this seems to make sense, but there are two big reasons which can make this more difficult than it may appear. Now, the first is the financial one. Let's say, for example, you've got a property that's worth £600,000, and your plan is to, at some point, downsize to a property worth about £400,000, releasing £200,000 as a lump sum to then use to fund your expenses throughout retirement. Now, the first problem with this is that pensions are effectively shut to you once you stop working. And the reason for this is because when it comes to making pension contributions, you can only put into a pension in a given tax year what your earnings are. So let's say, for example, your plan is to downsize around 70 to 75, which is what most people say they're going to do. If you've stopped working and have no earned income or salary, you're very limited in terms of how much you can put into that pension. So immediately, that £200,000 has an avenue shut off that would have been available if you'd planned for retirement whilst you're still working. Now, you might be sitting there and think, okay, well, that's fine, Ben. My plan is to actually use an ISA rather than putting money into a pension, which again is completely fine. But there are two big reasons that this may be difficult. The first is that obviously, if you're downsizing and releasing £200,000, your ISA allowance is £20,000 a year. So getting all of that money into an ISA is going to at best take 5 years if you're in a couple. But if you're on your own doing this, that's going to take you 10 years to get that money into a tax efficient wrapper. So by the time that money's within an ISA, you could be well into your 80s. And the second and most important point when it comes to ISAs is the fact that from April next year, anyone under the age of 65 is going to be restricted to putting £12,000 a year into a cash ISA. So unless you're willing to take a bit more risk and invest some of that money, that's going to make it even more difficult if you are downsizing before the age of 65 to get that money within an ISA. And the big problem with both the pension and the ISA being limited is that any money you've got outside of that, unwrapped effectively, could have a massive tax implication in terms of how much tax you're paying on that £200,000. Now, of course, there are various allowances that can be used to shelter some of the tax due, and even if you were to keep that money in a savings account within a cash ISA, for example, the problem with that is that over time, inflation is going to erode that value. So whilst you're getting that interest each year on that cash ISA or savings account, over a long time frame, the value of that money is going to be eroded hugely by inflation. So again, that's going to have a massive impact on how much income that £200,000 can actually provide over longer term. And the fourth point when it comes to the financial side of downsizing is all the other costs involved in that. Now, the obvious ones are things like estate agent fees, stamp duty on the new property you're moving into, solicitors' fees, any moving costs involved, and any ground rent or service charge involved if you were to purchase a leasehold property. So you could quite easily be in a position where you may downsize and release £200,000 of money from your property, but after fees, you may only be left with, let's say, £170,000 to £180,000. So there you can see that straight off the bat, you're losing somewhere between £20,000 to £30,000 just in fees from selling and buying a new property. Now, as I say, the second point is nothing to do with money, and it's often the one that's massively overlooked by most people. But before we move on to that, if you are enjoying the video, please do subscribe to the channel because I'll be posting a lot more videos on retirement planning and general personal finance moving forward. Now, the biggest reason that downsizing is often more difficult than it might seem is an emotional one. And what I mean by that is when you've lived in a property for, let's say, 10, 15, 20, or even 30 years, you can become very attached to that property. And as I say, I've spoken to so many people where they've said, we're going to downsize in 2 or 3 years' time. And a year later goes by, they say the same thing again, and so on and so forth, to the point where they never downsize at all. And the other problem is that the older you get, the more resistant to change you become. So let's say, for example, you're planning to downsize, let's say at the age of 75. The problem with that is that the data shows that if you haven't downsized by the age of 75, it's very unlikely that you'll do so because, as I say, people become more resistant to change the older they get. So if you are planning to downsize as part of your retirement plan, you really want to be doing this sooner rather than later. And you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, well, Ben, you're 33. What do you know about downsizing and retirement planning anyway? The thing is, I have no personal experience doing this, but I've seen this time and time again with people over the last 10 years of working with them, is they build into the plan downsizing around the age of 70 or 75 to then release money to fund their lifestyle. But the problem is they become emotionally attached to their property. And as I said, the older they get, the more resistant to change they become. So relying on this solely later in life as a strategy is a very difficult thing to do. And ultimately, the chances are when you do reach that age, you won't want to downsize. So building your entire retirement plan around that is potentially not the best thing to do. Now, I'm not saying you can't plan on downsizing whatsoever. What I'm saying is build that as a buffer or a bonus into the plan. Don't pin all of your spending from the age of 70 to 75 onwards on downsizing, because ultimately nobody knows if they're going to want to downsize when they get to that age, or even have the mental clarity to think about it at that age. So as I say, you really want to use that as a buffer or a bonus, rather than a silver bullet that's going to get you through from age 75 for the rest of your life. So if you're wondering if you are on track to retire with the income you want, when you want, what I would suggest you do is using my free retirement calculator. And you can find a link to this in the description below. It's very simple. You enter a few details and a calculator will show you if you are on track to retire when you want to with the income you want. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video and got some value from it. If you did, please do consider subscribing because I'll be posting a lot more videos on retirement planning and personal finance moving forward. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.